Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's episode, we're back working on the 34 Ford frame, part 3. A few more things the owner's asked us to do before he takes it back and puts the body on. He wants us to run all the brake lines, get everything working, and then do some paint touch-up on the areas where we've welded stuff here. He's supplied us with the paint. We're not going to paint the whole thing. We're just going to basically jack it up and do paint touch-up. That's what he wants. So we'll be putting in the brake lines, the proportioning valve, and the residual valves on it, making sure everything works and functions. Not sure how long the video is going to be, but there's a lot of details that go into doing it. It's quite important to set it up properly. So we'll cover all that in this episode. So follow along. So first step, we had to disassemble the frame and do all paint touch up on all the areas I welded and put boxing plates on. This frame was done in a marine enamel, so that's what the owner supplied, and we've got everything all paint touched up now. There's a couple pieces I made. They're hanging up over there. We've painted them with a rust paint. So right now, in the process of just reassembling everything. The rear end, there was a lot of marks on the rear end. We just painted it up with some trim clad black. That's what they wanted done. So I will continue to assemble the rear end and the front end and get everything back in place. And then we will start running brake lines. So I carried on putting all the parts back on the frame after we did the paint touch up. One of the more important things that I had to do was make sure I had all grade 8 bolts and then stover nuts, or I guess they're locking type nuts on here instead of the nylock ones. We have to use the mechanical lock nuts, commonly called stover nuts, I guess if you want to call them here, with the grade 8 nuts and bolts. So everything is back on, everything is tightened down, everything is torqued in, the front and the rear, basically putting it back to where it was at the end of part 2 of this video. Another thing I had to do, and I thought it was something simple, because it looks simple, was to put the shocks on. The customer supplied this neat little kit where the upper shock mounts actually mounted to the inside of the fender brackets. And they do. However, it doesn't line up. It must be for a different type of kit or a different kind of front end. So if you can see here, the actual top of the shock is in the same place as the mount is. So typically that shock mount would actually sit behind the shock and a bolt will go through, or in front of it, or in this case what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these off, I'm going to cut this tube off, and I'll have 2 brackets, so then the shock will actually fit and sandwich in between these, and we'll still be able to use a mount that goes here on the fender well. So I'm going to fix that up, tidy it up, paint touch it up, and get that done. The other thing that the customer asked us to do with this is he wanted us to run all the brake lines, prime all the lines, and basically get it ready to go. So far what I've done, I've got the flex lines on. We have a line going across the front from the right side to the left side, and we've plumbed it along here all the way up to the master cylinder. So what you have to do with disc brakes on the front end here, where your master cylinder is below the frame, you have to put in a 2-pound residual valve for disc brakes. Then we also had to put in the brake light switch, the stop switch. Now in the back, what will happen is, since we have drum brakes in the back, I have to put a 10-pound residual valve in that line, and also a proportioning valve. So I'm going to work on that. Just going to step you over to the bench over here. We have covered this before on how to make a double flare. There's, a kit that you can buy to make a double flare. I think, yeah, it looks something like this. You could get it from, I guess, Princess Auto, or I guess in the States, there's different places you can get them from. You can make them with this. It's a struggle. I've done it. However, what I did, I went out and bought this Eastwood kit probably 9 or 10 years ago, and it's really easy to make a double flare. Or inverted flare. But the most critical thing when you're doing it is when you cut your line off, you just got to make sure that that end is perfectly flat and there's no burrs on the inside and outside. So if you're to use one of these cutters and cut it off, you'd actually make shape like this where the wheel is in. So then you got to come in, make sure that that thing is nice and flat and there's no burrs onto it. So it's pretty straightforward, simple. Make sure you put your nut on first. And I'm not sure if the camera lady would have to go over there. Oh, go over the other side. And it's laid out on here what to do. So the first step is there's op 0. You put that in there like this, clamp it. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to push that, oh, I got that in there a little too tight. It's going to push it to the right spot. You can tighten it off, and then operation number 1 for a 3/6" line, you index it there. Step 1. And then op number 2 for a 3/16" line right there. Crank it in. And if you did your homework, you get a perfectly made inverted flare or double flare. You can do bubble flares on this as well, but that's typically what we use for the brake lines. Like I say, it's all in the preparation. You can make whatever length line you want. Just buy a roll of it. You buy this tool once and you just keep on using it. So I'm going to carry on making the rest of the lines for the back, and we'll try and wrap up this frame. Here we are. I put the front shocks in after looking at it a little more close. It looked as though these upper shock mounts were right, and what it was basically an optical illusion by looking down and seeing the shock come up this way. But what I didn't account for was that the axle actually is twisted at 7 degrees, so the lower shock mount is twisted at 7 degrees, so it gave me the illusion that I needed to move the upper shock mount back further. But instead, if I looked at it better, the suspension's going up and down, so the shock actually has to go right there. So shocks did go in all right. So we've got our grade 8 bolts in there on the top. The front shocks are in place. And then around the back, we carried on by putting the rest of the brake line in. In the back, we have to have a 10-pound residual valve for drum brakes. Then we put the proportioning valve in here and then plumb that all the way up here to the back to the flex line, and then ran the lines to the cylinders. This is just the emergency brake cable. It's actually not in place right yet. The owner has a setup where he's going to put the emergency brake, I think, in the original position. So these are just laying there for now. The other thing we did, we bled all of the lines. So basically now everything is really nice and tight. All 4 lines are, or all 4 corners are braking in that. So this is as far as we go with this particular project, with this chassis. It's what we were asked to do. It's going to go back to the owner. I think he's putting a flathead Ford into it with probably a 39 Ford transmission into it. And then I think there's a 33 sedan body or a 34 sedan body going to go right onto it. So like everything is all tight, everything is greased, everything is ready to go basically to do the final assembly for this on his project. Now behind the camera lady on the floor is a whole bunch of stuff, because the same customer has multiple frames and assemblies he wanted to do. So he's already dropped off half of the parts for another 34 Ford frame and chassis, which is not going to be exactly the same as this one. It'll have a different rear suspension, I think. So that's going to be in a future episode, so stay tuned for that. We're going to cover a couple different things. But for this project, it's ready to go and it's on its way out. Anyway, that's it. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. And I'll see you next week. And of course, if you want to send me comments or ask me questions, please do so. Everybody take care and have a great week.